Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. Mr. Deputy President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Real Estate Brokers and Agents. Mr. Deputy President, since this is second reading of the bill, I would like to proceed with the explanation forthwith. Mr. Deputy President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Real Estate Brokers and Agents. And as I mentioned, this bill had been circulated previously, and so there was enough, we hope, enough time for scrutiny and comments. And so I would want to just provide some context within which this amendment or this bill is being presented. Mr. Deputy President, the real estate sector in St. Lucia is a major contributor to the economy. The country benefits considerably from that sector, not just from the vendor's tax and stamp duty on the sales and financing of these sales, but even more so from the spillover to the various sectors and stakeholders who serve as foundation to the industry. Mr. Deputy President, the industry includes lawyers, bankers, surveyors, contractors, construction workers, and the glue in holding the entire sector together is the real estate agents and brokers. Mr. Deputy President, the Ministry of Commerce is tasked with a responsibility, among other things, to facilitate commerce, enterprise, development, and manufacturing, all with the overarching mandate to create an environment within which the economy will bluster and protect the consumers. Being aware of that, Mr. Deputy President, this overarching mandate that the Realtors Association of St. Lucia approached the Ministry of Commerce with not just concerns but with requests for assistance and safeguards, as well as parameters for the important real estate industry. Mr. Deputy President, I wish to recognize the efforts at this time of the association and the many persons who have contributed to the interventions that have been taken. Mr. Deputy President, in that effort, developing this bill were accelerated, or the efforts to develop this bill were accelerated and buoyed by the efforts of the association, which took responsibility at the time for considerable cost that engaged persons to aid in the development of the required instructive and framework documents. The Ministry of Commerce, as well as the Attorney General's Office, they didn't merely accept the draft as presented, but the initial draft was later submitted as policy framework and served as a roadmap to appreciate the concerns, challenges, and requests of the association and how and what could be done to address them. Mr. Deputy President, over the past few years, that ministry, the Ministry of Commerce, in collaboration with the Legislative Drafting Unit of the Office of the Attorney General or the Attorney General's Chambers, engaged in a lengthy iteration review process that led to the bill being brought before the Senate today. And so, Mr. President, Deputy, allow me to just provide you with some overview of the bill itself. Part 1 of the bill creates and outlines the operations of an entity to be called the Real Estate Board. And in Clause 4 of the bill, it provides for the Real Estate Board that will comprise 5 persons appointed by the Minister of Commerce. And these persons include A, an attorney at law of not less than 5 years standing, nominated by the St. Lucia Bar Association. It also includes a senior technical officer in the Ministry of Commerce. It also includes a person nominated by the St. Lucia Coalition of Services Industries Limited, Inc. Also, it includes two persons nominated by the association, and that is the Realtors Association, St. Lucia Incorporated, or such other body approved by Cabinet as representing the interest of real estate brokers and real estate agents in St. Lucia. Mr. Deputy President, the composition of the board was well considered to ensure that the interests of the public, including vendors and buyers of real estate, is protected. Mr. Deputy, Part 1 of the bill also states the functions of the board, and these functions are as follows. A, to consider and determine an application for a license to practice a real estate business. B, to include a license with or without conditions for the practice of a real estate business. C, to keep and maintain a register of real estate brokers and real estate agents licensed under this Act. D, to make internal rules governing its procedures subject to the approval of the Minister. E, to cooperate with the government ministry, department, or statutory body responsible for the enforcement of the laws of St. Lucia relating to the practice of a real estate business. And F, to perform other functions specified under this Act. Mr. Deputy President, this is to ensure that there is structure, there is documentation, and the persons transacting on your behalf or on my behalf are licensed, and that is, in that case, a real estate broker agent, and that they operate based on standards, and that there will be a monitoring framework in place to protect our hard-earned money and investments. Mr. Deputy President, I move to Part 2 of the bill. And Part 2 provides that framework for licensing of real estate brokers and real estate agents. Pursuant to Clause 23 of the bill, a real estate broker or real estate agent shall not engage in the practice of a real estate business unless he or she is the holder of a valid license. What this provision seeks to do, Mr. Deputy, is to ensure that all persons who wish to hold themselves to be realtors as an agent or a broker seek and obtain a license pursuant to this legislation. Mr. Deputy President, this section does not seek to prevent the people of St. Lucia from buying or selling property. I must stress that in Clause 23.3, we should note that the isolation transactions not undertaken in the course of or in the furtherance of or with intent to carry on the practice of a real estate business are not encapsulated in the restrictions of Clause 23. The clause is, in effect, seeks to ensure essentially that the persons regularly transacting real estate business obtain the requisite licenses to do so. Simply put, Mr. Deputy President, if someone is selling a house or a piece of land, this is one one-off transaction, and there is no intent to carry on the practice of a real estate business or license. In that case, that would be required. Mr. Deputy, the rest of this part of the bill outlines the conditions, effects, duration, and other parameters specific to licenses. Part 2 of this bill also provides for suspension and revocation of licenses, and quite importantly, the appeal from decisions of the board by aggrieved parties. Mr. Deputy President, Part 3 of the bill provides the obligation for our real estate brokers and agents. We recognize that these persons often hold funds on behalf of clients and charge fees for services. And these activities, Mr. Deputy President, should be sufficiently regulated to protect our citizens from abuse by bad actors in the sector. Mr. Deputy President, Part 4 of the bill that I refer to now provides a mechanism for complaints in cases of misconduct by agents and brokers. The mechanism for complaints under the Consumer Protection Act is expanded in Clause 49 of the bill to facilitate complaints to the Consumer Affairs Department where brokers and agents may have abused their office or licenses. This bill is not a particularly long one, Mr. Deputy President, but it is indeed a much-needed step in the right direction for the sector. In most of the developed world, the title of real estate agent or broker is one that requires not just a license, but adherence to a regulatory framework. Mr. Deputy, with respect and appreciation that many may hear of the reading of this bill and may worry about this government, or that this government is seeking to overregulate. We're not seeking to overregulate. What we wish to do is to assure the people of St. Lucia that we see this bill as a means of ensuring that the players in this very critical and important industry are adequately governed and will be subject to the adequate rules, and that the citizenry can rest assured and be certain that these persons are fit and proper. Madam President, in the event that these players fail our citizenry, a proper mechanism exists to serve and provide recourse to them. And so this bill has certainly made the rounds, as I did mention previously. It was previously circulated after first reading. And so it had initially, the ministry had initially engaged the Realtors, the Realtors Association in the development of the bill. Not satisfied with the review by that entity only, and fearing that non-members of the association would not have the chance to provide feedback on the bill, the Ministry of Commerce publicly disseminated the bill to other stakeholders and non-members. After receiving and incorporating some of the views and comments, Madam President, received during that process, the bill was made available to the general public. Madam President, this step was taken to ensure that everyone, the agents, the stakeholders, and all with experience in the sector and the non-sector, as well as interested parties, would have had an opportunity to, and the avenue, so that they would wish to review the bill and contribute to its development. And so, Madam President, we are satisfied, therefore, that this bill that has benefited from that amount of input, that amount of scrutiny and review, is a step in the right direction in molding a stronger and safer and more reliable real estate sector for our country. And having done all of that, we believe that it is now ready to be tabled, and I ask that our this Senate, provides and gives it the support so that it be passed. I thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill be read a second time. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Madam President. Just some very, very quick observations on the bill. In reviewing it, I think there's a lot to commend this bill, and there's some provisions that I will highlight that I think are a good practice that perhaps we should, as much as possible, adopt when we are creating these sort of regulatory frameworks. I do have two, not necessarily concerns, but just two things I would like the Leader of Government Business to perhaps clarify for me, and I'll get to them shortly. But let me just start by saying I think this is a welcome step. As the Leader of Government Business has indicated, this is the product of a lot of hard work, particularly from members of the association. I know from speaking to some of them, they were a little concerned at what seemed to have been a wild, wild west sort of development in their industry. And so they were pushing quite hard for this sort of regulation to come in and hopefully professionalization of the industry. The one area I think I would have liked, and this is a general comment for bills generally, perhaps that we need to have the regulations being promulgated at a similar time. So for example, in obtaining a license, one of the requirements is that you meet the prescribed qualifications, but that is not spelled out in the bill, and I'm expecting that it will be included in the regulations. But the issue obviously would be, as a practicing real estate agent, for example, I would be concerned that at this point, I don't know what that qualification is. And if I am already in the industry and I don't have the qualification, at least if I know going in, I can take steps ahead of time to make myself qualify under the provisions of this act. So perhaps if we can publicize that information as quickly as possible, we can get the regulations out as quickly as possible. We'll ensure that persons who are legitimately practicing in the area are not displaced unnecessarily. The other area of clarification I would have liked. There is a board being created, and the board is being given very serious functions. A lot of it will be administrative, but I note the Act again does not make much provision for the actual administrative side of things, how that is going to be arranged, how it's actually going to be operationalized. So the question I have is whether the board is going to be sort of a department of a ministry, so that it'll be relying on the ministry to provide that administrative support, or if the expectation is that it's supposed to be a standalone, independent body, and if, I know it's a body corporate, but there's no provision in the Act for how that body corporate is to go about dealing with the admin side of things. I recognize that Section 12 does provide that a member of the board must be paid remuneration for his services as to be determined by cabinet, and that the expenses of the board are to be paid out of the consolidated fund. But again, there's no provision for the hiring of staff, etc. under the Act, and I think that's one area that could be a bit clearer. Going back to the things I liked about the Act, in particular, I noticed Section 34, which deals with renewal of the license, specifically makes provision, and this is what I would like to commend, that we start putting into all our acts where you have a power to grant a license, the power to revoke a license, the power to suspend a license. It makes it very clear the basis on which the license would be renewed or not renewed, but notwithstanding that gives the express right of the licensee to be heard. And I cannot stress how important that is in ensuring good governance and ensuring that the legitimate expectations of persons and license holders in particular are not frustrated. So I would like to commend this particular section, that we begin to use this more in our legislation as we're providing for licensing regimes, to ensure that we encapsulate natural justice into those acts. And I think, again, I just want to highlight, again, just highlighting some of the things I like. The requirement that the real estate agents hold client funds on trust, segregated from their own accounts, I think is a very important step, again, in ensuring that there's accountability and ensuring that persons can deal with real estate brokers and real estate agents in confidence that the deposit is not going to disappear, that the proceeds from their sale is not going to disappear, and that there's a measure of recovery if anything were to go wrong. So with that, I just wanted to note again, I think there's a lot to commend this bill, and thank you for allowing me some time to comment on it.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President, and I thank the Senator Lee for his feedback, as well as the two comments that he raised. As for the first comment, I think the issue of regulations applies to almost every piece of legislation. And I think it is in order that regulations accompany the legislation. I think when we introduced the Tourism Development Bill, the legislation and the regulations came almost together. It was side by side. And I think that is in order. So I believe that these regulations, as can be done, can always be included or provided alongside, just after the bill has been passed. So I think there's still room for the regulations to be developed and included. And the confidence I have in that is because, for example, of the composition of the board. I think the method that was used, the formula that was used to come up with the composition of the board gives me the confidence that these regulations will follow. As far as the board, and he made a comment regarding the board, I think it is true that the board by itself may not necessarily be in place or able to provide the administrative function. But I believe that an agency/secretariat would be expected to be put in place to carry out that administrative function, while the board provides the oversight, the policy oversight. And again, because of the nature of the composition of the board, I have the confidence that that will happen. And if you note, The composition of the board includes various critical representatives from various sectors, including the Coalition of Services Association, the Realtors Association. There is an attorney at law, but that person has to be someone with a certain level of experience, and also a technical officer from the Ministry of Commerce with knowledge and understanding of how the sector works. So I think that deliberate sort of regulatory framework, that deliberate criteria for the composition of the members of the board gives us the confidence that both the regulations that he speaks of and the administrative functions will be accompanied and will follow the legislation. I thank him for that, and I look forward to that being done. I believe his comments and observations have been well noted, and as I've always tried, to ensure that it is relayed to the relevant department. In this case, it will be the Ministry of Commerce for consideration. Thank you, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the licensing of real estate brokers and real estate agents, to regulate and control the practice of a real estate business and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 1, clauses 3 to 22.
Real Estate Board.
Part 1, clauses 3 to 22 stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 2, clauses 23 to 44.
Licensing of real estate brokers and real estate agents.
Part 2, clauses 23 to 44 stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 3, clauses 45 to 48.
Obligations of real estate broker or real estate agent.
Part 3, clauses 45 to 48, 4 stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 4. Clauses 49 to 50.
Complaints.
Part 4, clauses 49 to 50, 4 stands part of the bill. Aye. Part 5, clauses 51 to 52.
Miscellaneous.
Part 5, clauses 51 to 52, 4 stands part of the bill. Aye. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Aye. Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion, say no. The ayes have it. I think the ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Act 2025.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move for the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Electricity.
Electricity.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move that this bill be presented for second reading at the next or subsequent sitting of this Senate.
Honorable Leader of Government Business. You want to stay? You want to stay? Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, as obedient as I am, I was only waiting for you to call me before I stood. Madam President, I move that the Senate do stand adjourned sine die.
Senators, the question is that the House do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. But just before we leave, Senators, just for a point of correction, this morning, when I indicated the bills that were passed in the lower house, let me repeat for your own information. It's the Child Justice Amendment, Virtual Assets Business Amendment, Security Interest in Removable Property Amendment, Real Estate Brokers and Agents, and of course the motion, the Value Added Tax Act, Resolution of Parliament to approve draft Value Added Tax, Amendment of Schedule 3, Number 1, Order, just for the record. I think we had a slight error this morning, and thank you, Madam Clerk, for bringing that to our attention. So, I think we have said the ayes have it. Sitting adjourned. Have a good evening, Senators. Right.
Nous venons au bout de session Sénat là, ici aujourd'hui en Parlement, Sainte-Lucie, avec session aujourd'hui, comme on disait, session Sénat là, avec l'année des niveaux Parlement en Sainte-Lucie, pour un niveau ça nous a créé qu'à coïncide côté c'est Mouna qui a participé, c'est maman, c'est Mouna qui électé à une élection. Avec mon qui a conduit un speaker, avec deuxième niveau qui est plus haut, c'est un niveau ça qui Sénat là, c'est qui choisit à part des façade opposition et puis façade gouvernement et puis l'année indépendant en dedans là aussi avec qui a conduit par président. Eh bien session Sénat là aujourd'hui c'est bien intéressant tout bonnement comme la coutume ça a fait. C'est discuter ça qu'à un niveau parlement qui est plus bas, ça a House of Assembly, mais qu'à discuter des bagailles. Pour aujourd'hui, ça a discuté qui était plus intéressant, c'était ça qui a créé. Après, nous avons commencé comme motion. En motion, un bâtiment qui a visité tout partout en la terre, il a créé Logos Hope. Et puis Logos, bâtiment Logos Hope, il cache un livre, il amène un livre tout partout en la terre pour indiquer ma maille, pour indiquer moun, avec pour signer la paix aussi, avec c'est plutôt un travail volontaire il aura fait, avec il aura visité Saint-Lucie plusieurs fois, l'année ça là il ici pour un mois, avec pour moi ça là qui ici il a mené des machines pour aller pas seulement Western Lawad, mais pour aller visiter tout partout en pays. avec machine nan yo mené yo besoin n'importe machine qui ka yo besoin payer taxe sur ça pour la petite ça yo commandé gouvernement pour tirer VAT là sur ces machines ça là-bas yo avec c'est ça qui mais ça ni pour passer en parlement ni pour parlement ni pour bailler permission n'importe bagaille qui a concerné VAT ni pour passer en parlement. Premier ministre a dit ça mardi. Avec ça, il était venu faire. Mais ça mené à chaque discussion comme plus bonheur, Virgile te dit, expliquer ça, ça qui passait, particulièrement qui commençait, et puis après il était présenté par un chef façade gouvernement, ça c'est honorable sénateur Dubian Ferdinand, il présentait avec pour débat, pour moun parler, discuter. Ça c'est face à l'opposition, sénateur Dominique Fédé commencé avec il allait en direction VAT, avec manière VAT, pas bon pour payer, avec enfin toutes ces bagages avec ça on est cause un chai halé cassé, il prend un chai temps pour moi quoi presque donner du temps pour discuter une motion seulement avec l'autre motion comme qui est intéressant de discuter aujourd'hui c'était ça nous a créé justice pour petit maman ça justice child justice un bill excusez c'est pas une motion avec justice ça il a fait c'est une loi que le gouvernement a passé pour bailler juge avec magistrat plus droit pour mettre punition à ce moment qui casse la loi. Avec ça, le gouvernement a dit, c'est ça la loi a dit. Mais en Chine, c'est mon qui dit, particulièrement si ça face à l'opposition, il a dit qu'il n'y a pas une bonne loi puisqu'il juge, yon c'était qui yon peut-être yon juge qui a yon pour peut-être même punition yon ga une quantité en l'autre cas au comprendre avec Julius peut-être
just one interjection the contribution by the independent senator as you were saying the opposition of course they didn't support the bill for the reasons that you gave they felt it could be biased and it could be prejudicial in the way the judge dispenses it. But the independent senator, Senator Lee, we had a noteworthy intervention on this topic. He was saying, well, he didn't quite agree that, judges do these things, just on a whim. He said usually judges have sentencing guidelines and they would take into consideration, everything. They do not operate in a vacuum, to use his words, is how he described it. But he did have some concerns, and he wanted to know, why this bill was coming, for what purpose. His question was, what mischief is this bill trying to correct? And I think the leader of government business, when he answered, when he was wrapping up, he said, in essence, just summarizing, the bill could act as a deterrent to crime. The bill could act as a deterrent to crime, and that even all the criminals who would see the limit of 3 years on a child offender could use young people to commit those crimes. So I just wanted to interject.
Oui, avec mais il était intéressant puisque discussion à ce loi ça là particulièrement il y a des causes en chai par particulièrement par chef face à l'opposition qui mène toute l'autre qualité bagaille à ce crime il était parler en chai à ce situation crime en pays avec manière si loin gouvernement pas qu'à manager crime bien j'ai privé à ce après ton chef police et tout bagaille comme ça qui partait nécessaire. So, ça c'était une journée qui était très intéressant avec nous. Nous quoi c'était un bon journée. Virgil?
Yes, it was interesting. We have our colleague here, Mr. Morissette. But yes, all in all, the bills that was passed, the motion to provide the VAT exempt for the vehicles at Logos Hope, the Virtual Asset Business Bill, the Security Interest in Movable Property Amendment, the Child Justice Bill, and the Real Estate Brokers and Agents Bill. So this was the proceedings for today. We thank you all for staying with us here at the National Television Network on behalf of the entire crew and Mr. Morissette, who was just signaling us. My name is Virgil Leontu. I'd like to say thank you so much for watching.
Merci, merci pour Virgil, avec pour vous qui a regardé nous, avec pour les techniciens, avec tous les autres monde qui participent. Nous avons dit merci un pile, et nous avons retourné pour station, pour rester plus station télévision MTN.